Well, this conversation is going to be good, and no doubt there's been some spiciness online. I have Pastor James Baird, author of, was it King of Kings?
Yes, sir.
Yes. And I actually listened to it on a drive because I've been driving so much. That's been how I've been getting my reading.
I haven't listened to it yet, but I heard that the audiobook is like not great.
Really?
Or did you think it was fine?
I don't know. I thought it was fine. I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks lately. I wish you didn't read it, right?
No, I
No.
didn't. I didn't even know we were doing one. I just saw it on Amazon one day. I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah, I was glad for it, honestly. So James, you're a pastor at Covenant Pres down in Naples, right?
Yep, that's right. Covenant Church in Naples.
Good.
PCA.
So we're going to talk a lot of things. You've done the tour of, you've done the book tour in today's context. You've been on every podcast possible, and so I've been putting you off for well over a month, if not a couple months, because I'm like, let's get him when that stuff settles down. I'm not sure it has settled down. How many podcasts have you done at this point?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't know, maybe 15, 12, around a dozen. Yeah, a lot of them.
That's great. And your book has gotten around, and it's made a lot of noise. And of course, you're on Twitter or X.
X.
I can't make the shift, honestly.
And
you've been getting into it, not by anything. You're just posting comments. A lot of them historical, and you just get attacked mercilessly.
That's right.
So we'll talk a little bit about that. But what I want to start off with is you and I have had conversations and with others on this term that gets thrown around online, and honestly, it just kind of gets added into different posts, like the post-war consensus and what that is. And every once in a while, you know, there may be this thing about strong gods and weak gods, and it's all part of this Christian and nation, Christian as citizen conversation, cultural engagement. And you seem pretty knowledgeable on this. And
well, I've read the book. I'll put it that way.
Okay, which book? Which book are we talking about?
So it's by Rusty Reno, who's the editor of First Things, and he wrote a book called The Return of the Strong Gods. I think the term post-war consensus had been used, lots of other places, but his book is really the one that made it popular in our circles. It's a great book too.
Yeah, so I've been listening to his book, and it's longer than yours. And the problem with driving and listening to books is you can zone out if it's too
It's a hard book to listen to too. Yeah,
it is. Yeah. It is. But I mean, like, this may come as a surprise to a lot of people, because I would think, just by language, post-war consensus, post-war talking about World War II.
Yep.
But really a consensus that develops in the United States post both wars, at that point in the 20th century.
Yep.
And I would think a lot of people would view that as a good time. People think of, the 1950s, Leave It to Beaver, this idealized view of the good American life. And so it's odd to see and hear people who are conservatives speak about whatever this consensus was in our nation in a pejorative way. So what's going on there?
So, and the other, I think, interesting thing is that people talk about the PWC, the post-war consensus. Usually it's like right-wingers, and this was written by the editor of First Things, very elite magazine. Rusty Reno is a really sharp thinker, very, very insightful in his analysis. So I think there's really something here to wrestle with. And the basic idea, as Reno kind of lays it out, is that after World War II, the devastation was so horrible, the atrocities were so great, that the Western societies tried to figure out how in the world can we ensure that Auschwitz never happens again. And just think of that term, like, for the concentration camps, as exemplary of everything bad that happened because of the Second World War. And so this consensus starts to develop of, we need a whole new approach to life to make sure that never happens again. We need a new worldview,
Why
basically.
why would that be an American thing when, we won the war? So we beat the Nazi concentration
Hmm.
camp people. So why is that happening and is it
Yep.
happening in more than just the United States? Is it a
It's the whole
Western?
West. It's
Yes.
the whole West. So it's the whole West. And yeah, so America won. It becomes the American Empire after World War II, right? We
Yeah.
basically control the world, besides that little spat with China, with Russia. Um, we were a contender, right? Um, yeah, so it's how do we make sure we never have to do that again? How do we make
Hmm.
sure that another Hitler doesn't come about and that there's never a Nazi move again? That's the idea. How do we make sure we never have to, fight them over there so we don't have to fight them over here kind of thing? And so this worldview starts to develop and get disseminated through the elites at the universities and the people with the different levels of power. And the basic idea is that, according to Reno, is that strong loves, strong attachments to things like justice and truth and metaphysics, things that are immovable, are what ultimately lead to fascism, authoritarianism. That's kind of what this consensus the elites start to
So
think.
Reno's not affirming that he's
He's describing
analyzing
it.
the moment.
He's analyzing the moment. Yep,
Okay.
that's right. He actually wants to go back. He thinks we should go back to what he calls the strong gods. So the best way to understand strong versus weak gods is a strong god is truth. A strong god is any value that you'd die for. So would you die or kill for? So would you die for the truth? Yes. Would you kill someone for the sake of justice? Yes. Would you yeah, those are the let's just use those two. So you start switching out from justice to start talking about fairness. Would you ever kill someone for the sake of fairness? No, right? Or they trade truth for meaning. So, would you die for the sake of meaning? No, that doesn't make sense. So they start trading out these older values that were strong gods, truth, justice, and they switch them out for what are weaker gods. They don't compel such a strong attraction and commitment like meaning, like fairness. And so this kicks off a whole Western project to build something that they started calling from the very beginning the open society. I think there's this great quote from George W. Bush. It gives it at George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush's dad. He gives it at the UN, and he says that we believe in open borders, open trade, and most of all, open minds. And the idea is if you have an open society where just about anyone can belong, no matter what they believe or what they practice, they belong in society, then this open society will ensure we never get Nazism, we never get authoritarianism. Again, because fascism is a closed society. Some people belong here, some people don't. And so you can already see this in how we talk about tolerance. Tolerance means that you should be able to love and accept and give equal privileges to someone else, even if you don't believe a man can become a woman. Right. So this whole worldview about what society is, what values matter, which ones are dangerous, all go back to trying to make sure we never get another Hitler. So today in the discourse, you can see this through being a fascist or a Nazi is like that they might as well be calling you Satan. It's like there's nothing worse than being like, and of course Hitler's horrible. Like we're not justifying what Hitler did. We're just describing how these words are used today. You can't, one of my favorite things to say is when you ask someone, hey, if you could go back in time and kill one baby, there's a right answer to that question. And the right answer to that question is not, I would never kill a baby. Right? Like the answer is you go back and you kill baby Hitler. And there's some weird things that come up. Hitler is more scary than someone like Stalin, even though he killed more people. Communist China is not nearly as scary as Nazi Germany, which is kind of weird, when you think about it for a second. And the reason is this whole Western worldview has started to develop. And the only thing we all need to have in common to function as a society is a commitment to openness. If we all agree to openness, then we can survive as a society. And that's the basic idea of this post-war consensus. Like, this is how the Western world is going to do things.
So why this confuses me, or
Hmm.
has confused me, is because either it seems to go against everything I've been taught
Hmm.
about that time frame, or when I would hear from
Hmm.
people who lived in the quote unquote greatest generation,
Yep.
those warriors from World War II. I mean, you think of
Hmm.
Superman, truth,
Yeah.
justice in the American way. It
Yep.
either either it's my own ignorance or my own failed education. Although I thought I had a fairly good classical
Hmm.
education. That you know there was a lot of American patriotism in
Yep.
our identity
Hmm.
as having the truth. I mean, like you see that
Yep.
being attacked now and for the last
Yep.
20 years about American colonialism and all
Hmm.
kinds of things. But
Hmm.
coming out of World War II, that it and the whole war effort,
Hmm. Yep.
wasn't there a huge consolidation around the Western way of viewing truth and justice in these things? So like
Hmm.
why would there, because Hitler existed and
Hmm.
whatever else was going
Hmm.
on in their,
Hmm.
like you said, Stalin and others, it seems like our way of life was the right one. And
Hmm.
that's the way it's
Yeah, it does,
taught.
doesn't
So
it?
yeah, right. So why was there this move away from the very things that defeated the issue?
Great question. So, first of all, the seeds are what gets sown in the late 40s and 50s.
Ah,
Right. So your normal average person, 40s and 50s, they didn't grow up under the post-war consensus. So their ordinary way of life was fantastic, was great. But you see from the elites them starting to sow these seeds. And we are now experiencing those seeds blooming, basically.
yeah,
And you see this, think about this. So, William F. Buckley, not a huge fan, but for many conservatives, really like him. He writes a book, I believe it's called God and Man at Yale. And this, Rusty Reno brings this up. And the argument that he makes in this book is that Yale should go back and teach the classics, because you can't just have a school that exposes people to lots of different ideas. You need to have a school that teaches people the truth. It is immediately ridiculed as authoritarian, as associated with the KKK, as basically one step away from Nazism, because he's said that a university needs to tell students what the truth is. And the response was, no, it needs to be open. You need to expose students to different ways of thinking. That's the point of education. That's ethical. It's unethical to tell people this is the truth. It's ethical to say here are many different perspectives on the truth. And this is in the 50s. Okay. So you see this happen at the elite level. And the university curriculum also flips over around this time as well. Before, they taught a more or less a classical model. So you would read the Greeks and the Romans, because they said the Greeks and Romans, though they were pagan and had their problems, they will show you heroism. They'll show you justice. They'll show you the search for truth, and you should be like them. That was the idea. Then it shifts in the 50s, and they say, well, we're not going to say you should emulate these great thinkers, these great
mm,
heroes. We're going to say you should be exposed to the great books of history so that you can do critical thinking. And then it morphs into, and we should also expose you to other cultures' ideas. Right. And you see how that just develops and develops. So you've now today we hear people wanting to return to classical education. They want to return to the great books. Well, that's returning to the 1950s that was trying to get away from the classical model, because it's not just that you should be aware as an intelligent person of the great books, it's that you should emulate the great men of history
yeah,
because they did it right.
yeah.
So
So
you
about
see the
uh,
seeds.
yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
So about 15 years ago, when I was
Hmm.
teaching classes in the church on
Yep.
modernism, postmodernism,
Yep.
worldview,
Yep.
the way I would teach this phenomenon and maybe it was simplistic, but it seemed to make sense, is, after World War I and World War II,
Hmm.
which solidified the 20th century as the bloodiest century in history,
Yep.
uh, like all of the assumptions of modernism were being questioned. So,
Right.
according to modernistic thought, through increased technology, education, science, those are the things that are going to cure the problems in the world. And if people just were educated and we
Yep.
could uncover more and more truth and then educate people on that truth, there would be more and
Yep.
more peace. And
Yeah.
you saw it was actually the opposite, that
Yep.
with more technological innovation came more destruction. And
Yep.
so, the same technology that produces good things produces completely destructive things and in evil
Yep.
hands like that of Hitler or whoever.
Yep.
And so there was this move from modernistic thought to postmodern thought, which,
Yep.
like, where truth is more relative, and you
Hmm.
have your truth and I have my truth, and
Hmm.
so that's the way I always kind of viewed the
I think
shift. Good.
I think that's a huge part of it. I think that we've done a really good job of identifying one slice of the
Yeah.
post-war consensus, which is relativism about truth,
Yeah.
relativism about truth and ethics, right? Christians have a good handle on that. But there is a whole nother slice of the post-war consensus that we've not gotten a handle on, and that is relativism about values.
Yeah.
Values in general. C.S. Lewis talks about this in The Abolition of Man. He is primarily focused on some things are beautiful and some things are not, right?
Uh-huh.
And that there are ways of living, right? Different ways that cultures develop, and some are better than others, right? And that we ought to cultivate beauty in our culture, and therefore we need to have a country that, however you think about assimilation, however you think about, once you start talking about borders, now all of a sudden we're like, well, we don't know if it applies there. So it's not just relativism about ethics and about truth. It's also relativism about politics. Um, and I think that's the piece that snuck in to lots of Christian teaching that we're kind of starting to see. Hey, this isn't what Christians taught before 1950.
Mm. Is this why boomers get, like, this is why the word boomers is now a pejorative, and
Yeah,
whereas it didn't used to be, by the way.
yeah, no,
uh like I used it. I'm always like a year behind or 2 years behind, like, the way
same
things.
brother.
Yeah, really. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
like, I used it not as a pejorative, just to
Uh-huh.
describe the group of
Yeah,
people, and I got attacked viciously for being rude and
yeah,
not valuing my elders and all kinds of things. But
yeah.
is this why, that generation gets a lot of the blame for where we are today?
I think so. I mean, I'm a boomer pastor. That's my job. My church is mostly boomers, and I
Oh,
absolutely love them.
yeah.
But I think that every generation has its blind spots, and I think that the boomer generation, what happens is they're the first ones to eat the fruit of what the old way of thinking about politics was, um, but then end up thinking and proliferating the new way of doing politics, which now the younger generation is having to eat the bad fruit from that. And so it is this kind of turning point generation. There's because all their parents were the greatest generation. They were the ones raised on the old way of doing things, and they're kind of besides the silent generation, they're really the first one that starts owning and championing the post-war consensus.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but in general.
No, no, right. But you do see, a certain, especially like in our circles in
Yeah.
PCA
Mm-hmm.
or evangelicalism, there is a sort of a doubling down by
Yep.
that generation
Yep.
on sort of the old way to kind of thread the needle on stuff,
Yep.
and
Yeah. Sure.
respond to stuff in non-committal ways that don't make really anybody too upset, but kind of ruffle everybody. And it's just, and
Yep.
maybe Keller perfected it with third wayism or
Yeah.
something. But
Yeah.
you see that impulse coming up
You
where
do.
guys are not rightly discerning the times
Yep.
of what's going on. And admittedly, things are happening so quick. Like
Yep.
who 5 years ago, and maybe that's too soon, maybe so 10 years ago would think that there would be a turn back to conservatism among the younger generation. I mean, all we were told, I'm 50, so I'm not a young guy anymore. And so I'm Gen X, but I often identify more as a boomer, honestly, because that's kind of how I respond to things, I think. Um, but all we were told about with millennials, which I guess that's what you are, right?
Yep.
Like there was no going back.
Yep.
Millennials are decidedly liberal, and that's it. We've lost,
Yep.
and it's like no, and I was like, well, what is this pendulum swing I always hear? Like
Yeah.
the 60s and 70s were nuts, but there was a
Yep.
move back to some kind of normalcy in the 80s, even though
Hmm.
that was a terribly immoral decade, honestly. When I go
Yep.
back and watch movies from my childhood, I can't believe I was watching those things.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so it does seem like there's a number of people that can't rightly discern the times when
Hmm.
they don't realize that there is a repudiation of a lot of what they've been sold by the younger generation. It's
Yep.
and a dissatisfaction
Hmm.
in that. So what's the whole connection between, you already alluded to it, but
Hmm.
between the weak gods and the strong gods, and
Yep.
how is that playing out?
Well, so I think it's worth noting Rusty Reno's solution. His solution is go back to the good, strong gods, good biblical values, right? You can fight Nazism without opening up society. You can fight it on the basis of saying Nazism is not true, it's not just, and we ought to oppose it, right? So
We can make truth claims.
you can make truth claims. You could even say, and because it's not beautiful, it's not a good, honorable way of doing whatever. You can make these appeals based on strong gods. So go back to the strong gods. We need tight social connections. We need in-group and out-group dynamics, so that's just how people socially work together, right? And band together and have a tightly bound up society with values and customs and habits. Like this is all good and normal. If you have a society that's always open, it's like a mouth with its jaw hanging shut. You can't eat, right? Society needs to eat. It needs to nourish itself. And that we don't even have to say, anyway, so that's his proposal. I think it's right. So what was your question? I just want to make sure I got that in there.
Give some examples of, like, so how did the god,
Yep.
what were the weak gods and what are the strong gods? You've already alluded to the strong gods is
Yeah.
more is again standing on truth and
Yep.
saying
Yep.
things are true. That would be
That's right.
a strong position, which of course in a culture that is supposed to be tolerant, you're not supposed to take that. So it's your
That's
truth and
right.
my truth and all that. So what are, like, again, you've done this with me before where you've
Yeah.
explained, like, this is a weak God, this is a strong God. Can you
Yep.
go through
Yeah,
some of
I'd be
those
happy to do that.
anecdotes?
So let's talk about religion. There's one weak God that we've been very good at critiquing, and that is this idea there's many different ways to God. Many different ways to God. Obviously, that's every religion is like a blind man touching part of the elephant. All the old gross analogies. We say no. There's only one true religion. There's only one way to God. It's Christianity. But now let's flip that and say, okay, if Christianity is true, it's the true religion, and Christianity impacts all of life, and it doesn't just come to redeem individuals, it comes to redeem communities. We should structure our community around the truth of Christianity. And if you're not a Christian, you can live here, but you're going to have to follow our laws and our customs and our habits. You're welcome here, but you have to kind of assimilate with our community. You could think of this even at like a county level. I'm not necessarily thinking like a whole nation. Well, all of a sudden, people who would say, yes, there's no religious pluralism would turn around and say, well, but your county has to be open. Like you have to allow different religious people to come in and live life however they would. And that's where people in my generation are saying, well, why is that the case? It's certainly not un American to say we would like to have Christian laws. I mean, the best two examples are blasphemy laws and Sabbath laws, which are still on the books in a number of states today. For the
I know
longest,
that's why it was so when people have attacked you, and there's
yeah,
one notorious post that
yeah,
you and I saw about, well, that's why, James Baird's project won't work because laws don't change
yeah,
hearts.
yeah,
And it was
yeah,
like this, this aha moment that is being spread to the internet. And we're like,
yeah.
laws aren't supposed to change hearts.
That's
That's not the goal of the civil
right.
authorities or law.
That's right. Law changes behavior.
Yes.
That's right. So,
Order society. It doesn't, and it also is completely ignorant to the, like what you just said, is that
yep,
we've actually had these things. So they assume that, when a person like you advocates for, the enforcement of the first table of the law,
mhm,
that you are forcing belief, which is completely ignorant of
yep,
your position.
that's right.
And that's why I come out and defend it, because I want people represented fairly. So
Mhm,
somebody can
thanks.
disagree with your premise in your book, and we'll get to
Yep,
that,
yep.
but disagree with him fairly and
Mhm.
honestly.
I appreciate that.
Nobody is arguing. I don't know a single person arguing in this debate that Sabbath laws are going to mean that people are enforced to go to church. Now, maybe there are people. My
Right. Yeah.
understanding of it is more along the
Yeah.
lines of regulating commerce
That's
and
right.
structuring society to prioritize
That's right.
the ability to honor the Sabbath, not
That's
forcing
right.
people in their hearts on how to do that.
That's
And the
right.
same with the blasphemy laws. So,
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So why can't we have a county that says, "Hey, listen, we're going to make a really fair law that says you're not allowed to speak ill of Christianity openly, revile Jesus or the Trinity or the New Testament, Old Testament in public. You can't do that. You'll get 3 warnings, then you'll get a fine or whatever."
okay, good. Yeah, so you're not saying like if they do that, you're going to behead them.
Yeah, no.
That's what I
Yeah,
mean. They,
right.
they they immediately go to the death penalty. Like
Yeah,
that, if
that's
you
right.
blaspheme, you're going to be killed or something.
That's right. That's right. And it's funny, people say, "Oh, well, what about the First Amendment, freedom of speech?" It's like, guys, we were doing this. That's not what the First Amendment meant. We had blasphemy laws for forever. Like the First Amendment meant that the Congress couldn't regulate your speech, but that you could have local governments that did based on what was best for the community. And you can see this from a Supreme Court justice like Joseph Story from the early 1800s, who was appointed by James Madison. So, point being, as soon as you start talking like that, where you say our community is going to put up these laws, these customs, and these habits, you're welcome to come, but you have to abide by them. And if you would not like to abide by them, totally fine. You can go live somewhere else. That's a closed society, right? There's a way of doing life that isn't perfectly open in every respect to every way of life, right? And people who would say, on the one hand, of course, there's only one true religion. We don't believe in religious pluralism, would then want like a political pluralism where the community is not allowed to organize itself in this kind of closed way.
So with
And
that, like, did you hear my discussion with Miles Smith?
I haven't listened to it yet.
Oh man, I wish you did for this conversation, because it
Oh,
seems
sorry.
like that's why it's hard to put him in a box, because
Mm-hmm.
he's completely fine with. I mean, he fully establishes that the United States was a Christian nation,
Yep.
and he has no problem with that terminology, that a nation can
Yep.
be Christian, and he thought that was
Yep.
a good thing. But
Yep.
there's no, in his world, in political philosophy,
Yep.
there's no imperative to do or be that. And so like the Dearborn,
Yeah.
Michigan, like calls to prayer, totally fine if that community wants to do that.
Yeah. I don't think that's right.
You'll have to
It,
listen to the conversation. You'll have to listen to the conversation. But it's interesting
oh,
because he's friends
mhm.
with Hart, and DG
Yep.
Hart wouldn't agree with
Yeah.
that
So
position
D.G.
either.
Hart
So
would say there is an imperative not to do that,
right,
right?
for either
And my
group,
for either group. And what Miles is saying is that there's no imperative.
anybody can do
Nothing
it.
imperative. Yeah, whatever you
People
like.
can choose to do that if they want.
Yep.
Yeah,
Interesting.
good.
I'll have to
I
watch the episode.
keep interrupting you, but
No,
just
no,
to
no, you're good. I don't
add
even
to the
remember
conversation.
my only point is this is how so the post-war consensus gets expressed politically. And even people who may be against a postmodern, let's say, view of truth, postmodern view of morality are still for a postmodern view of politics. And that's where the rub is coming in
Yeah.
right now. And the interesting thing for people my age is that we grew up listening to R.C. Sproul, right? We grew up listening to the, name the teacher, people who are railing against postmodernity in these other areas, right? But then we still see postmodernity in our politics. And we're wanting to extend those principles and say, let's be consistent.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I was starting to listening to this book, Reno's book, The Return of the Strong Gods, and having this conversation with you guys, I said this to you, and then I tweeted it. Is the post-war consensus just simply a settled commitment to pluralism, egalitarianism, toleration, and their propagation as goods in society? And that oversimplifies it, but I tend to like to do that for people listening,
Yeah,
to just distill the whole thing. So
that's right.
essentially, this move to pluralism in
That's right.
in all its facets.
All of its facets.
And what we see right now, and I think that's what it's the fruit of that.
Hmm.
And so the irony in pluralism is what you do is you essentially subjugate, if you're committed to that, your view,
Hmm.
and then you subjugate that to those of these other views that you're trying
Right.
to give equal hearing, because they're going to make their view a strong God. So
That's
you made it
exactly.
a weak God, and where I saw this was, and I have no idea who this interviewer was. I think Megan Basham had shared a video. So there's some interviewer, and then there was some Colombian woman. I don't know if she was famous, no idea. He
Mm-hmm.
was asking her if the United States was at war with Colombia,
Oh,
who
I
she
saw this. Yeah, it was.
who
Yeah,
she'd
yeah.
support, and she said, well, Colombia.
Hmm.
And he goes, but you're an American, United States of America citizen. She goes, yeah, but Colombia is my country.
Yeah.
He goes, yeah, but you took this vow, did you not? And this vow, and he reads
Yep.
the I forget what the citizenship
Yep. Yeah. Oath or
vow,
whatever.
whatever it
Yeah.
is, and he basically says, it basically says, like, you renounce your allegiance to
That's right.
wherever you're coming from,
That's right.
and you swear allegiance to the United States, or some,
Hmm.
again, I might
Yep.
be getting the words wrong, but the
Yep.
principle there, it didn't matter to her. And that's
Doesn't
essentially what you have when you
matter.
elevate pluralism to godlike levels, honestly.
And let's talk about egalitarianism too. I mean, we have rightly combated one aspect of egalitarianism in religion, which is to say all religions are on equal footing, spiritually. They're all just different ways to get to God. Okay, but people who've taught me, my generation, the problems of egalitarianism in that sense are now defending the idea that all religions should be treated equally politically and
That's
legally.
right. Yeah.
Right? That makes no sense to me for two reasons. One, I just don't think that's right, like theologically. But then, second, I think that you can hold that position only so long as our society can pretend to be being Christian without saying it.
Yeah.
So what I mean is that our whole legal structure, even to this day, assumes Christian principles.
Yeah.
Right. And right now, you can pretend like those aren't explicitly Christian principles and say, we don't want to be explicitly Christian, right? We're just going to keep using our legal system as we are. But eventually, you're going to have more and more people who come along and saying, I don't believe that. So here's an example. Why are you not allowed to kill Christians in the United States? Made in the image of God, right? Made in the image of God. And you're not allowed to kill people because God isn't doing holy wars anymore. Right? Only the civil magistrate can when they break the law. Well, that's a Christian assumption. If you're Muslim, they do not believe that, right? They just do not. So even then, you're still preferencing Christianity in your law by not conceding to a Muslim interpretation of justified killing versus a Christian interpretation of justified killing. So it's just practically it won't work. Um, it won't work unless you defend it. And
Yeah.
I'm always for putting your cards on the table. Let's put our cards on the table and we say, nope, we're a Christian country, and that's why our laws are this way.
Well, you know what's interesting, in because this is part of a series that I've been doing. I don't know if I've had
Yep.
6 or 7 people on now.
You've had a lot.
People, yeah, people who are thought leaders, whether they want to be or not, just
Yeah.
their position and their view is respected and is
Hmm.
also excoriated. And there's a number of people that won't take the Christian nationalist title for
Yeah.
themselves that I'm increasingly see actually agree with quite a bit of
Yeah.
this. And
Yeah.
so, Miles, he's not a Christian nationalist, but
Hmm.
he'll say a lot of things that fit in line with this
Hmm.
about, yeah, we're a Christian nation. Our laws were Christian. The
Yep.
citizens of this country viewed it as Christian, and they viewed
Yep.
their role in as much. He goes back to the institutions, but like then he
Right.
he includes in institutions not simply like schools and
Hmm.
civic associations. He includes the legislature and the
Yeah.
judiciary. I'm like, well, that's the government, you
Yeah.
know. But but essentially, like they viewed their Christianity as they responsibility to keep
Hmm.
those institutions
That's
Christian and
right.
for those institutions to propagate Christianity.
Yeah.
Of course, he's a historian and I guess
Yep.
political scientist. But you have, so Todd Pruitt, who's pastor but well
Hmm.
known in the PCA for mortification of spin, who's
Hmm.
come out hard against Christian nationalism. But my whole conversation with him
Hmm.
was his view on not just the importance of patriotism, but how Christianity should be the religion of the land and other religions shouldn't be given equal access to,
Yeah.
and so like he has no problem with
Yep.
political expression that honors Christianity, but he doesn't
Yep.
want to see uh, you know, Hindu celebrations in Texas or what's
Right.
going on with Islam in Dearborn, Michigan, and
Yep.
yet firmly against, Christian nationalism. And I think maybe this will be a good segue to the Kevin DeYoung article a little bit.
Hmm.
So Kevin DeYoung writes this article
Yep.
yesterday that essentially says, I'm not a Christian nationalist, but I could be,
Hmm.
or something like that. Or, I agree with a lot of this, but I don't.
Hmm.
And he essentially, articulates in a KDY way exactly the conversation I had with Todd on this. And
Hmm.
so there is this desire, and maybe in your world and in your view of the post-war consensus, and again, we will get to your book, there, guys like them and maybe a guy like me is
Hmm.
clinging to the post-war consensus sort of, but wanting it both ways, wanting
Yeah.
Christianity to have privileged status, but
Yeah.
not be able to really codify that in any meaningful
Concrete
way.
way. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is my worry. That's a great way to put my worry. Yep.
Okay. Wow. Look at that.
Yeah.
So, and we can, you can engage with the DeYoung article if you want, or not,
Yeah.
however
I
you want.
think I forget who it was. I actually think I'm not like a huge Wilson guy, but every once in a while he's got a great line and I love to steal it. And one of them was, I think he was talking about Richard Dawkins, who talked about how much he loves Christmas music. But Dawkins says he doesn't like Christianity. And Wilson said, "Oh, so you love apples, but you hate apple trees." You know?
Yeah.
And sometimes we're in these conversations, that's how I feel.
Well,
I love the fruits of a legally preferenced Christianity, where Christianity has a privileged status in all these different ways. But I really don't like having to, so you eat the fruits, you don't like the fruit tree. That is what I'm worried about.
so let me add to that with another Wilson. I think it was a Wilson quote that I either
Hmm.
heard in his interview with CNN or with Ross
Hmm.
Douthat, or I listened to his book Mere
Hmm.
Christendom,
Hmm.
and he said to that effect, it's like, being born on third base but thinking you got there on your own. And then the funny thing was I heard Ben Shapiro say that
Hmm.
to I forgot who he was on with, some liberal commentator. It
Yeah.
was really good. Or Ezra Klein.
Ezra Klein. Yeah.
Yeah, in his interview, he said it to Bill Maher, whatever,
Yeah.
Because Bill was talking about, being an atheist and being able to be moral and have all, and he goes, well, that's, you were born on third base and you think you got there on your own. So I don't know if he was listening to Doug Wilson. I'm sure it wasn't vice versa, honestly.
Yeah.
So it's okay. Well, you
Yeah.
can say more on that then if you want, because I think that's where a lot of us find ourselves is we recognize, well, first of all, like Christianity
Mhm.
is true.
Yep.
And
And
if
good.
it's right, if it's true and it's good, and it's kind of like you have the owner's manual and you don't want to use it because you don't want to offend people that can't read. It's like,
Yep.
um, that's a bad analogy because I'm not trying to say people are ignorant who don't agree with us. But my point is,
Yep.
it's like, how would we not want to bring our faith
Hmm.
into the public square? And that's what DeYoung essentially says in his
Yeah,
article.
and this is the thing I'm trying to figure out, and I hope I'd love to talk to Kevin. He and I know each other. We've had good conversations kind of offline, and I actually did think his article was very conciliatory to me. He didn't mention me, but at least one of his questions I think was about my book, and
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
I think
I wouldn't be surprised. I wish he would have you on Life and Books and everything, or I guess he changed that
yeah,
now. But yeah,
yeah, yeah. So I appreciate Kevin, and we've gone back and forth. I was like, oh, but I do have one thing I really want more clarity on from him, which I think he'd love to give, is when he says he wants Christianity to have a privileged place, that he wants Christianity to be a public, it's in the public square and so on. But on the other hand, I also hear him say that he does not want Christianity to be legally preferenced in any way.
but he does. I mean, the article.
But
So
then sometimes it sounds like he's saying he does. So maybe he can clear. Maybe he wants Christianity. So I'm trying to figure out exactly what his model would look like practically.
I think what
Um,
he's saying is he doesn't want, like, he wants the free exercise of other religions. So he doesn't want the
yeah.
preferencing. I'm totally putting words. I mean, I'm not speaking. My understanding is he wants Christianity preference, but not in such a way uh, that doesn't allow other people of other faiths to practice their religion.
Yes. Which there's a version of that that I agree with, right? But for example, I'm perfectly fine with a county saying you can't build a mosque downtown. Can't build a mosque downtown. The only religious center we're going to have is going to be the big First Presbyterian Church, and we're going to kick out the liberal pastor. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm joking. Assume First Presbyterian Church is PCA, right? And you can't have a mosque downtown. We're not saying you can't have a mosque somewhere else. Can't do it downtown because we're privileging Christianity. You know what I'm unclear of from DeYoung is he okay with that? Like, is that all right? Or because of the
Right.
First Amendment. You see what I'm saying? So like brass tacks.
I don't think. Yeah, I don't. Again, I would have to speak. I'm not speaking for him. It
Yeah.
doesn't
Or
seem. He does seem to advocate for a westernized
yeah.
version of all these other religions. So he
Yep.
certainly doesn't want Sharia law
Yep.
or the Muslim Brotherhood stuff. But
Yep.
and he says it in his article about one
Yep.
a sort of westernized view of like
Yeah.
Islam, this peaceful exercise of their own religion, and they're able to do that unharassed.
Yep. But like even things because like I think brass tacks, when you think about what it means to privilege Christianity, it means those sorts of things. It just does. Otherwise, it's like, no, 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 we have to allow them to also have a mosque downtown. Um, and it can be the same size as the church. But we're going to privilege Christianity, so on 4th of July, we're only going to have a Christian pastor pray. So now you have a Christian pastor in the park, right, giving a prayer on the 4th of July, right next to a church and a mosque. It's like that's weird. Like this, can't you just consistently kind of pull these things together? Because
Well,
why
how do you argue? So then, how do you not argue? How do you adapt
Yeah.
your view to say the early church, which would be exactly what was going on for Christians. I mean, they wouldn't have any
Oh
kind
yeah.
of privileged status with the government of Rome at that time. Yeah, that's what they would be doing. Paul would go into the Areopagus, or if they wherever in Ephesus there was a temple of was
Hmm.
Artemis
Hmm.
or Diana, and so that has just seemed people say, well, that's just normal Christianity, that we are a religion, a worldview, a philosophy. We have the truth, but we're speaking it into a world that is pluralistic.
Well, so my answer to that is that you got to deal with the cards you've been dealt, right? So when the apostles come onto the scene, the Roman Empire is pagan, right? And of course, if the best that you can get is being able to preach in front of another temple, that's awesome. Um, But it's different between saying what should a pastor do given the current political situation versus what should a Christian magistrate do when given the opportunity.
So
There's a,
hold on, but seems to me that that's what DeYoung is saying. Like when you read a lot of the
Mhm,
quotes from his article,
mhm.
it was, one guy joked, he's like, Stephen Wolfe could have written that. So it almost seems like it's a matter of prudence that he's arguing from where we are. Like you can't, I mean, Christianity, even if I haven't
Well,
seen the latest numbers, but even if 60% claim to be Christian, the numbers would show it's under 30 truly, like who believe in inerrancy of scripture.
I
And,
think I think that you're right, and so this is why I really want more details on brass tacks what he's talking about, right? So, for example, if you're in Dearborn, Michigan, and let's say the first policy you want to do is we're going to for some extreme policy that doesn't allow the Muslims to worship or whatever. I might be like, yeah, that maybe that's not prudent. Like I agree with you, Kevin. But what if you're in one of these smaller towns that's just in driving distance from a major metropolitan area where there are a whole lot of refugees, right? And you start to have people who want to move in to your small town and build a mosque downtown. Is it wrong for them to make that law? And I can't tell right now if Kevin is prudentially or principally against that. Because if it's prudential, I may agree with him. If it's on principle, um,
so
then we have
here's some quotes for listeners from the article that I
yeah.
found pretty helpful. As Christians, we should not approach cultural engagement as an effort to negotiate favorable terms for our own surrender.
Yep.
We ought to argue for prudential policies and good laws that flow out of the best of Christian political thought. I mean, that's pretty clear. He also acknowledges, which is good, the Presbyterians who revised the Westminster Confession of Faith in 1788 still assumed that the civil magistrate would be Christian and that Protestant Christianity would have a privileged place in the new American Republic. They were not seculars. And that's, fascinating. And I think it shows some deliberation and contemplation on his part from some of the other stuff that he's written. And he has definitely written like oscillations within a narrow band on this in
Yep.
5 years. And that's, I think we need to be fair to people in their thought. I mean,
Mhm.
we're all working through this. And
Mhm.
so, I saw it. One more quote. Nations are right to want to preserve a sense of national identity and to insist that newcomers embrace something of their new nation's story and tradition. Nations also have the right to secure their borders and establish immigration restrictions. These are commitments that many countries in the West have ignored to their peril.
Yes, agreed. But here's my follow-up question,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
One of our traditions is no mosques downtown,
Yeah,
right?
so
Is there anything wrong with, like, principally, like ethically, theologically, is there anything wrong with saying, as part of moving to America, we conduct ourselves as a Christian people? So
so are
you
you
can come, but you have to honor the Sabbath. You can't build a mosque here. See what I'm saying?
you don't want a mosque now? I want to just dig into that, like
Yep.
more again, rather than it being so anecdotal.
Yep.
Is it okay if it's not downtown? If it's in the country? If it's within walking
Yep.
distance of the town, but not downtown?
Yes. So the answer is I don't know. This is a short answer because those are really complicated policy decisions, right? So I'm not coming here with a political program that says no mosques in the United States, no mosques within 100 yards of the center of downtown. No, what the point is just that I think that Christian civil rulers have a duty and a right to regulate things for their context in the best way to make it easy to be godly and hard to be sinful. And prudentially, that's going to look very different depending on the context. Um, and so I'm just picking out little examples, little example. Would I? And I'm saying is I'm not sure of Kevin's position. I couldn't tell. And those are the kind of the particularities that I think it's where the rubber meets the road.
So Kevin's position. Let's assume the worst, which I
Okay.
I think you know me enough now. I'm always assuming the best of everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, let's assume the worst, given
Hmm.
within the boundaries of what he has written on this. So not
Hmm.
the worst that he's some
Yeah, I
leftist or he's
gotcha.
R2K or any of
Yep.
that. The
Yep.
quotes I just read provide some pretty clear statements about what he thinks. Now, where
Mm-hmm.
the rubber meets the road is so let's assume the worst in those things is
Okay.
Kevin DeYoung and his position and his philosophical position, but also his position in the reformed world and maybe even beyond,
Yep.
uh, a a hindrance to your program.
No, I love Kevin, and I like how he's engaging on these different things, which is good. So it's productive. I think all of us are trying to figure this out, right? Always trying.
Yeah,
Now, if we were both in the same county, well, we'd be across the table from each other, you know. So in that sense, we couldn't, we'd want two different things. I may be
that's
advocating, say, no mosque downtown. He may be saying we need to protect the right of Muslims to
great.
mosque
So
downtown.
I like that. I like it. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're at the debate table. It's
Yep.
the or even you're advocating against what he's advocating.
Yep.
Okay. It is it like the old Looney Tunes thing. The
Hmm.
bell rings and you
Yeah. Yeah.
guys leave the negotiations and then go
Yeah.
grab a beer and a cigar or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, could
For
yeah. And
sure.
so there's still collegial.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. I think that what DeYoung is saying is he says you couldn't have a mosque downtown because the government's not capable of figuring out whether or not Christianity or Islam is true. I think that that's the how
Do
I'm
you
reading
did you see that in a it might be hard to find, but like did you see that specifically?
it. Yeah.
Like
Yeah, let me pull it up.
yeah, because what my understanding was in or the impression I'm getting, so I didn't see
Hmm.
that line, uh, would be more along the idea of prudence. Once again, we have however many couple million Muslims here, and it's not just Muslims. We have people from other religions here. So, there's this thing that we can't just change it, so now we have to figure out how to all live together. Because that could be what he's saying too.
Yes, it could, and we wouldn't have a major disagreement if that's the case. All right, I'm going to read this paragraph. Okay. And this is his response to me, actually, so it is relevant.
You think he's talking to you?
Yes, yeah, I do, because the
Okay.
question is, what does it mean for the civil magistrate to promote the true religion, which is the thesis of my book, and Kevin and I, he's read my book and we've talked about it. So, so here's what he says: every political leader must give an account to Christ of his beliefs and behaviors. That's true for all human beings. But once we insist that the government should be in the business of promoting the true religion, as the Westminster Divines understood that task, we are left with the question of who determines what is the true religion. We can say that we know what the true religion is, and that, of course, if what the civil magist that is what the magistrate, and that, of course, is what the magistrate must promote. But the clear record of history demonstrates that human beings will not agree on how ultimate spiritual and metaphysical questions should be answered. To require human government to promote the true religion is to expect that government is competent to answer these questions. The
Ooh,
result
yeah.
will be something closer to might makes right than to the enlightened rule of godly magistrates directing each of us to our heavenly good. A better approach, which most Christians and most Westerners came to discover, is to take government out of the business of discerning and then promoting the answers to life's most important questions.
Yeah. So
I,
I now
I, I think I have a problem with that. I don't think that's now. To be fair, it seems like in that paragraph, DeYoung is saying this in response to someone who thinks the civil magistrate should reform the church, should call synods, things like that. Um, but that line of reasoning, I just don't think is correct. I don't think it's right to say that like as soon as you enter into your government office, you're no longer capable of determining the difference between true and false religion, and therefore legally you must treat them equally. I can't tell whether or not that's what Kevin is saying exactly.
I wonder if there's some if it's being convoluted a little bit. Like when I read that, I did not, and again, I'm coming from it for my own presuppositions. I did not
Yeah.
come to that with the idea that he's saying a Christian people couldn't determine that Islam was false. I took that in the context that he or a Miles would be speaking. And if you listen to the interview with me and Miles, the discussion, you'll this comes up, like who's which religion. So, I mean, clearly we have brothers in Christ, brothers and sisters in Christ that are Anglicans and Lutherans and Baptists, and we all think we're right. And we all acknowledge that we're not infallible, but to the best of our ability, you and I believe Presbyterianism is biblical and these other things are aberrations. And you know, the Baptists clearly would say that about us. And so when I read that comment, that's the light in which I'm reading it, is you would have this endless, particularly in the United States.
Yeah, so this is a great point. So is he saying like the government is not competent to determine whether credo baptism or paedo baptism is correct? You know,
I took that as what he was saying, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I would kind of disagree, but I understand what he's saying. You know what I mean? But
you disagree, but if it were a bunch of Baptists running things, they would disagree with you. I mean, they would say, I disagree with Kevin because we're right.
Yeah, that's always going to happen in any politic.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that's another. I feel like that's a gotcha that people bring up often. It's like, well, you know, but it's like, well, unless you believe in relativism, you know, that's just politics. People have different viewpoints, and so you have to come to an agreement somehow, you know?
Yeah, so that's why you argue for a pan-Protestant. And I think he actually, honestly, that tells me more. Again, he probably did read your book because he quotes something about he does reference a pan-Protestant nation, which would mean, you know, like there's just like a Protestant.
And I'm not the first one to do that. So
yeah, I know. Let's
my point being there is I could understand this reasoning about maybe things indifferent, you know, the classic adiaphora, right? But the problem is, I think unless there is a limiting principle combined with that argument, where you say, well, there are some things about true religion the government is not competent to decide. I'd agree on that 100%. But other things the government is competent to decide, you know, then I would say that's my position. I think that's my position, you know. So again, what I'm pointing out here is that I'm very curious to see how these principles would get worked out on particular political issues. That makes sense?
Yes. So, you know, when Miles did this with me on the well, who's truth? You know, the Anglicans, the Lutherans want nothing to do with your Sabbath views and this and that. And I said, oh, okay, look, it's not like in Christianity we don't have to understand and deal with this. We do. We have Catholicity in the faith. We obviously agree on the Apostles' Creed and then quite a bit more.
That's right.
And a Christian worldview and a biblical world and life view does not differ drastically whether you're Presbyterian or Lutheran or any. I guess honestly, your eschatology, it does differ, and yet there's still so much commonality in how we view living life between dispensationalists and covenant theologians like ourselves. And so, yeah, I think that's.
I think
you know this fear does not, like, Christians aren't supposed to operate with this fear that, well, this could happen, so we're not going to pursue it, you know. And I'm not saying DeYoung is being fearful, but I saw it a lot with, like, you know, my conversation with Brad Isbell, and again, I'm not saying he's fearful, but the concern that, well, if the wrong group's in power, they'll use it against us.
Yeah.
And I just never see in the Christian faith how we're concerned about the freedom. We're not concerned with that, with the freedom to spread the gospel, because that enables the freedom of Muslims to spread their view. I mean, you know, we advocate for these things, and we shouldn't be afraid of the alternative.
That's right. I think this is a really important point to make. I think I'm responding to some things I've heard Miles say, which he makes good points. If I was going to reframe some of the things that Miles has said, I'd put it this way. I'd say, you can't slice up the pie of your polity the way that they used to be sliced up, right? So the truth is, in America, you're not going to find a county where everyone is 100% Presbyterian. right? Probably not. If you do, it's going to be a small county. You're going to have people with all sorts of weird ecclesiastical views, weird theological views, and so your coalition that you build to, let's say, run this county, run this town in a Christian way, is going to look a bit strange. It's not going to look like Scotland in the 1630s or something, right? You're gonna, maybe what you do is you say, okay, our Christian coalition in this town agrees, no mosques downtown, but only 20% of us are Sabbatarian. So all we're going to do is just have a declaration from the county commissioners that today is Sunday. We're not going to close down business, right? Be like, okay, we'll deal with that.
Miles is fine. Miles would be fine with that.
Yeah, but he makes the point. He's like, well, you have Lutherans disagree with Presbyterians, and I'm like, I agree. You're going to have to build a coalition politically that won't look like Presbyterianism in the glory days. It won't look like 1696 New Jersey. It'll look different. But the point is that a people have a duty and a right to organize their society in a way that glorifies God, and they'll have to make concessions. They'll have to make trade-offs and deals, and it won't be perfect until heaven. But they have the right and responsibility. That's where we differ. The right and responsibility to do that.
Okay, right. The responsibility is, and I pressed it. I said, do they have a duty?
Yeah.
And he would say no. So I know we're short on time and we're kind of at time. I want to briefly just share a little bit about your book and then hear any comments you want to make on it. So what I loved about it was, honestly, I was not looking forward to another political theology. I was not looking forward to another intense read. And what I got was an extremely informative, fun, I'll say read, but I listened to it.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot how I worded it to you back when I did this. It was simple but deep, if that makes sense. And so the syllogism, was just brilliant because it's, the government, and tell me if I got it wrong. I mean, I haven't looked at it in a while because I have it on Audible or something. Like the government has a duty to promote the good. Christianity is a part of the public good. Ergo, the government has a duty to promote Christianity.
Right.
And it's like, and your challenge is to anybody to, okay, well, refute that, And I actually have a few thoughts on how it could be refuted, but there's a lot of things that are a part of the public good, but it might not be prudent to do.
True.
But what I'm really shocked about with this work is how much backlash it's gotten.
True.
It's like people are arguing against not your work so much, but against the movement that it's associated with. Any thoughts, questions, not questions, but thoughts or anything you want to...
I think that's true, that I don't take the label Christian nationalism. I don't mention the term in my book. I'm just focusing on one thing. What's the duty of people who will hold a civil office, and try and give the kind of classic American answer. But yeah, some people quickly associate me with the worst figures in the Christian nationalism movement. And, sometimes it's like on accident. Sometimes it feels like intentional, like they almost want to create an association between me and someone that has a bad public image. I think that the thing that gets people most riled up is the fact that this does not fit into that post-war consensus kind of worldview. Because the core thesis of my book is government can't be neutral toward which religion is true. And in fact, it has a positive duty to ensure that the true religion, and there's only one, and it's Christianity, is promoted, is advanced in the city. The best... Go ahead. Were you going to say something about that, George? Yeah. Now, I think that Kevin does ask a great question of me. I think it's the best question. In this article, he says, well, what does promote mean? What does promote mean? And the truth is, I tried to write the book in a conciliatory way. In fact, when I wrote it, I was thinking of Kevin, and I thought, I think he can agree to this. He just might say, well, yes, I believe the government must promote it, but you can promote it in this way and not that way, right? And then we can have... My point is to set the table for a good debate, which is which ways of promoting Christianity are best, given our current scenario. That's the idea. So I remain very neutral on how. You could have someone come up to me and say, it is unwise to not allow mosques downtown. Like that actually will be counterproductive. It will not promote Christianity. It will actually hurt the promotion of Christianity. And I'll be like, hey, I disagree, but let's hash it out, brother. We're both aiming at the same target, right? So that's one reason why I left it very open-ended, because I think instead of arguing over whether the government should or even may promote Christianity, I'd like us to start arguing over how. I think that's a better conversation to have. So.
Oh, I love that. That's great. And this is kind of what I've said online as I've seen the reaction to Kevin's latest article, which I honestly thought was one of the better ones he's written on.
I did
all
too.
This.
I did.
Okay, if you disagree with him, that's fine. He's allowed to have a viewpoint, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure like why certain groups, and I haven't seen this among any of my friends, but certain people then are assassinating his character over it, or viewing him as an enemy because he doesn't subscribe. Like, I haven't seen anybody in the Christian nationalism discourse and conversation actually fully agree with anybody else.
Yeah. That's true.
But he's just an easy target, I guess, and I don't know. I just want, and that's what my series has been. I actually have taken some criticism privately, mostly privately, about all the different people I'm interviewing on this. And it's like, well, you're upset that I interviewed Stephen Wolf, or you're upset that I interviewed Brad, and then, somebody was upset that I interviewed Brad, and I said, what about Stephen Wolf? Like, so I'm just having conversations. I'm sure I'm going to have maybe Dr. Hart will be upset that I interviewed you. No, I doubt it. Actually, I'm hoping to have him on, and then close.
Hey, sneak me in. I'll just
sneak you in. Oh, that's
Wait, I want to flip it on you, George. What do you think? Do you think that it is permissible? I think it's permissible for a county. Let's assume that the federal courts allow it. Okay. Assume the federal courts allow it. Do you think it's permissible for a county to say zoning laws, only Christian churches are allowed downtown? What do you think?
21st century America, I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No.
Wait, well, permissible, I mean, so when you say 21st century America, you're talking about like whether or not it's prudent in our current context.
Yeah.
Right? So you would say it's technically permissible, it's just not prudent today. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I do. I think I see a lot of the wisdom in Miles' position. Man, if you hear that blower, it never fails, man. But like the editing will...
George, what about regulation against blowers?
I am all for... I am all for jail time for people.
Jail time for
these blowers are the bane of my existence. He's going to come right up on me. It's unbelievable. But it'll edit out. So I do think people have a right to govern themselves how they see fit. Where I disagree with, so I agree with Miles on that point. You see this?
Yeah, that's crazy. Look at those leaves.
Where I disagree with Miles is a people that have the access to the truth.
Yeah.
Like they have a duty to govern by that. I actually liked Kevin's conversation with David Van Drunen. He said,
yeah, I remember that one.
If you were to establish a Presbyterian colony on Mars and it's just Presbyterians, would you set up a Christian government? And he said, Van Drunen said no. Yeah, I think that's silly. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, let me press you on it. Okay, what about a county out in Montana? So not Mars. It's 21st century America, but it's in Montana, and everybody in town's on board.
Yeah, I think, but I think it's okay. So what about in your, like, just a stone's throw away from you where they have a Catholic community that was it Ave Maria, and they built this Catholic convent. Are you okay with that?
I think it's formally great. It's just materially wrong.
Yeah. Well, this is fascinating. I don't know how loud it is where you are, but I can barely hear. And there's actually leaves. Hold on.
Literally coming in. All right.
So let's Now I'm getting dust. Look at it.
Yeah, it's
Just
pretty bad.
every time I film something like this happens, and I can't track it to a day. At any rate, James, yeah, they're getting snowstorms in some parts of the country, but for me, it's leaves. Seriously,
All
brother, good talking to you.
Good talking to you too. All right, see you, dude.
If you want to know the worth of a seminary, go take a look at their graduates. Our graduates are all over the world. They're planting churches, they're revitalizing churches, they're translating the Bible, they're starting discipleship movements. It's heart-shaking, life-changing, and just mind-expanding of what God is doing.
You know, sometimes I really do have to pinch myself that what I get to do with the ministries at BTS, the engaging with the students and the impact that God uses us to have on the lives of our students, it's a pleasure, it's an honor, and it's a joy.
Jesus is still building his church. So we need to equip the pastor teachers who equip the saints. We need to equip the elders who shepherd the church. And I am grateful that Birmingham Theological Seminary is available to be a part of the expansion of the kingdom of God in these very crucial days.